Okay, so welcome to this topic, which is known as Introduction to Web Accessibility, Advanced HTML CSS course on the Odin project. So Odin project is one of the projects which covers accessibility, and there are not many courses which makes new learners know more about accessibility. But now, as we are developing further and further, accessibility is becoming more and more important. So every new beginner or intermediate developer should know about how to implement various accessibility purposes into their applications. Introduction. At this point in the curriculum, you have learned incredibly valuable concepts in whichever full stack path you chose. You have created some awesome resume or these projects, and you should have a better understanding of some HTML and CSS concepts. One could even argue that you may now love working with CSS. So I hope you are enjoying your CSS, working with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. What you may not have too much of an understanding of, though, is the topic of accessibility, often referred to as A11Y, due to there being 11 letters between the first and the last letters. So we generally do this with web topics. So internationalization, I18N, localization, L10N. So that is what we do with all the big words. So this is accessibility. Accessibility is A11Y. Unfortunately, this is a topic that many people either don't know much about or just don't take into account when developing websites. If you fit into either of those two categories, you may have adopted some habits that aren't exactly A11Y friendly. Before we get into how you can break away from such habits and begin implementing A11Y friendly concepts, it's important to first understand some basic information about web accessibility. So the learning outcomes, we should be able to explain what web accessibility is. So you should know what is web accessibility. Web accessibility means that websites, tools, and technologies are designed and developed so that people with disabilities and other circumstantial limitations can use them with as few barriers as possible. There are different types of disabilities, including but not limited to auditory, physical, motor, cognitive, or visual. Disability can be permanent, such as a user who is completely blind or deaf, or it can be temporary, such as a user with a broken arm. Users can have multiple disabilities at any given time. Older users with changing abilities may even have similar conditions as those who have a disability. Situational limitations are a little different. So with this, we are trying to be more empathetic to other users. So that is something we would want to learn and put into our web applications. Using a phone outside on a bright day, browsing a site with one hand while you are busy doing something else with the other, or living in an area where the internet is slow or the bandwidth is expensive are all examples of situational limitations. These limitations, unlike a disability, occur to users only in specific situations, but are still important to keep in mind when developing a website or application or app. Why web accessibility matters? Let's first look at a non-web example to gain a little perspective. Imagine being in a multi-storied building that has no elevator. For some people, this might only be an annoyance. No elevator. I guess I'll walk up a few flights of stairs then. A person that requires a wheelchair, however, would find it impossible, or at the very least much more difficult, to go anywhere beyond the first floor. Even if a person in a wheelchair had someone to lift the wheelchair up each step, it would be a much more difficult process. The point here is that an elevator would have made this building more accessible. The building, in this analogy, the building is your website and the elevator is a collection of various accessibility features and tools. It's a pretty big elevator. When you develop a website, you are developing it for users and you need that website to actually be usable by them. People with disabilities, older people with changing abilities, people who aren't as tech savvy, and people with some sort of situational limitation are still users, and websites should be as equally usable by them as possible. One other pretty big reason that accessibility matters is that depending on the country, there could actually be laws requiring accessibility to be implemented. So you would be required by law to make sure that it is accessible to more people. So in this assignment, go through the diverse abilities and barrier. This is a w3.org article to get a better understanding of how some users with disabilities are affected by inaccessible sites. Watch the video on web accessibility perspectives. This is also a w3.org initiative to see how and which users can benefit from accessibility features. Each video is pretty short and has audio descriptions and transcripts. If you prefer, the page also has a link to a compiled version of all the videos on YouTube. So knowledge check. What is web accessibility? Now you have a fair bit of idea what is accessibility to make it accessible to more number of users. Who truly benefits from accessibility features? So there are different kinds of people who would benefit if you put accessibility features in your website or application. Additional resources. The business case for digital accessibility on w3.org goes over reasons for implementing accessibility beyond just being more inclusive to more users. How people with disabilities access digital content. This is a YouTube video. It's a rather long video, 45 minutes, but it goes over a lot of various assistive technologies and will offer you some more perspective on how users with disabilities may browse the websites that you create. When we design for disability, we all benefit. So this is another YouTube video. Is a video featuring Elise Roy that furthers the point mentioned in this lesson that accessibility benefits everyone. While this video is a more general overview that doesn't revolve around web development specifically, it can still be an eye-opening experience for new developers.